Okay, well, first of all, thank you and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the How We Heal series. So this is brought to you by members of the Inner Arts Collective here in Toronto, Canada, which the series itself, it's all about sparking conversation about different wellness topics, the themes that are emerging as we both deal with the response to COVID-19, but also generally in our lives. These topics and themes come up time and time again. We've come together as practitioners to decide on some important topics that we feel are coming up for our clients and in our communities. Our goal is to really offer resources and tools and strategies to help everybody thrive. So my name is Melanie Ohlenberg, and I'll be your moderator today. And I'm joined by Andrea Tirone and Chris Dubb. We always get started with these panels by acknowledging the land that we're on. I know I started by asking you all where you're writing from right now, or where you're joining us from. And I'd like to invite you to take a moment to just center yourself and feel the land that you're on while I do a land acknowledgement for us here in Toronto. Here in Toronto, we acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So take a moment to close your eyes, reflect on and recognize the people from the lands that you're on. And also the ancestors in your bloodline. The work we do here today helps us in this moment, and it builds on the past. And the work we do here today will create a better future for many generations to come. Thank you, guys. So to get started, as you know, today we are, the topic of today's conversation is dealing with a healing crisis. We understand this is an intense topic, and we only have the hour. So of course, there's going to be so much that we don't get into, but we'd like to touch on some of the main themes and the main discussion points to really get you on the right path. So to get started, I'd like to invite Andrea. Would you mind introducing yourself and what brings you to this topic? Why it's dear to you, just so people can understand the perspective that you're coming from.
Yes, of course. So, hi everyone, I'm Andrea Tirone, and I'm a member of the Inner Arts Collective, and I practice as a registered psychotherapist and I guess a hypnotherapist, although I haven't been using hypnotherapy in my virtual practice, which is what I'm doing right now, is 100% virtual. So when we were actually thinking of topics back in the end of 2020, early 2021, for these panels, I think this was one of my suggestions, was dealing with a health crisis or a healing crisis. And the background on that is just over the last year or so, more significantly than in the other 5 years of the time I've been practicing, I've had more clients who have come with their own and also loved ones crises or moments of illness or health concerns, and it's taken so many different shapes and forms. And I think it was just a really sort of poignant, I think, for where we are right now and as a global community, but also just sort of a topic that spans time. So I thought it would be a neat panel discussion for us to bring to this series.
Thank you very much. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself and the perspective that you bring, why this topic is important for you?
Yeah. uh, this might be the most important topic for me of anything that comes up, at least most closest and personal to me. Uh, I wear a lot of hats. I think first and foremost, I'm all about teaching self-awareness and practices to point to our true nature. I assist people. I'm an intuitive healer, so I very easily see emotions in people's field that they may be unconscious of, and I help them basically locate where this stored emotion is in the body. I can pinpoint basically the center of this, hold it in awareness, and ask different questions to be able to process through these emotions and traumas. And so so much of this work I feel relates to healing crisis and to preventative medicine and to just simply self-care, so we can be aware of our emotional experiences, aware of how our thoughts are creating our reality. And when we're aware of this, I really do feel it prevents a healing crisis. And why this is such a dear topic to me is became I didn't know at the time, but like chronically ill about 12 years ago. And I still face some stomach and digestive issues to this day, but some major gut health issues that affected me on so many different levels. There's just such a huge story to it. Even for me to start to go into it right now is probably going to take up too much time. But I definitely became aware of how spiritually connected it was, these physical health issues, and my body basically just started to purge. And as I started to purge, I became aware of my repressed emotions as well as my subconscious belief systems. I just suddenly started to become consciously aware of it, and I think it was due to the level of pain that was starting to come into my experience. So I feel it's very important to talk about these subjects because I think one of the hardest things to just do first and foremost is just to acknowledge that we are going through pain, and that we do need a level of healing. And that level of acknowledgement I'll go into further of why it's so important, and also why it's just even challenging that and in of itself. Because we really do need to prioritize ourselves more when we're confronting more pain and realizing that we're needing more healing. It is such an inner journey, and self-care is of the utmost importance. And we don't want to downplay it, which I think is such an easy thing to do.
Yeah, so true. Thank you. Yeah, we're in a pretty intense time, and I know for me personally, there's just been so much that has mounted in a lot of people, and so many folks. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of folks too that are taking the space that they need to really dive into issues that maybe they hadn't explored before, and it's bringing up a crisis as well. But with all the stress and stuff that's going on, I think it's more common than ever to either go through your own health crisis or have somebody very close to you that's going through it. So I look forward to hearing from you guys today about how to identify and work through and cope and support each other through this. So to get started, just to lay the foundation for about what a health or a healing crisis is. How do you know you're in it? What would you guys say are some of the symptoms that so we can be aware and know if it's happening?
I feel like we were both going to press the clicker. I can only speak for myself, but I know, even looking back to myself, like 22 years ago, as I was like about 22 years old, and I'm 34 now. I know one of the most prevalent things that I was really denying was this underlying sadness, as well as this like numbness, and the same experiences that were bringing me more joy and happiness. And I was like doing the same things, and like even other people were still in a good mood, and it wasn't I wasn't feeling it anymore. And maybe I was outgrowing the people that I was around, or I was just wanting and desiring more. But that was one major thing that I realized I wasn't really looking at, that there's this level of like sadness and like lack of connection, and this underlying feeling like, things weren't quite right. And I was just not able to like sit with that and really reflect on it, to start to be aware of what was actually there. There's a lot of other things. I would say at this point, what allows me to be aware of, I think about 5-6 years back, when some of these things were still quite challenging. um, it it more relates to energy levels dropping, more consistent levels of fatigue and brain fogginess. So I was noticing I wasn't able to make decisions nearly as quickly, and in indecision for a lot longer periods of time. And then I began to doubt myself a lot more often. So I was taking action even less, and even on simple things like, going for a walk or a bike ride or something. I'd be like thinking about it and like almost having like negotiations in my head. So I was really not able. I was saying I wasn't able to like choose just some of like the normal basic things that would be healthy for me. And then that started to increase the anxiety, and I didn't want to be seen in that. So then I realized it, and then there's this self consciousness of like shame, and then not wanting to show people the state I'm in. So then it creates even more of an isolation. That's it. It's a good way to start for now.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll pick up from there. Um, when I think about your question, Melanie, again, like I think about it too from the two perspectives, just because of where I've been sort of integrated with my clients most recently in the last year or so, with their own crises, but also those of parents for the most part. And when it comes to how, sometimes it can come on maybe a bit more slowly. So, if so for my, let's say it's my own health crisis or healing crisis that's happening within me, I may start to feel more exhausted, or I may start to feel a heaviness, or a bit of disconnection, and I may sort of put it off as like, oh well, work has been really busy this week, or well, the weather's been really bad this week, or it's the middle of winter, or like really sort of trying to put it off of me, and put the blame on these external factors, without necessarily realizing what's happening cumulatively with myself. In another way, and one that has been like recently familiar for myself, was about 2 years ago now. I had a series in 1 week at the beginning of 2019, a series of injuries befell me in my, sacral and root chakra area. The most major of which was disc slip at the L4, L5. That was the most excruciating pain I've ever felt in my life. And I thought, is this going to last forever? Because, of course, we don't know. We don't have the calendar that says, as of this date, you will no longer feel the pain, or you will no longer be suffering. And so, in that sense, I knew right away that I was in a crisis. It didn't creep up on me. It was there, and I was in it. And there was a sense of fear, a big fear around, when is this going to end? Is this going to be my life? How much pain am I going to be in? How do I fix this? And how do I advocate for myself? And I think and do others have the ability to advocate for themselves? Do we know what it means to advocate for ourselves? I'll switch briefly here to talk about, when a parent or a loved one, a friend, family member, someone close to us, not necessarily from that broader community context, which I know we'll touch on, but when a loved one is in a health crisis and we feel very attached to it, and maybe because the experience I've had is really with clients whose parents have been in these crises, the individual who's not physically in it, starts to perhaps feel a sense of strong obligation, strong responsibility, strong fear about what will happen to their parent. And of course, psychologically, emotionally, this goes back to attachment. This goes back to our own sense of mortality, our own sense of survivability. And even if we're adults at the time of the crisis of our parents, we still feel a deep sense of, if something happens to our parents, I won't survive. I won't survive if my parent doesn't survive. And that is something that, we don't necessarily feel on an ongoing basis, but when we start to feel that, that might be a strong indication that something's going on with our parent, or our loved one. And so in addition to the responsibility and obligation, there might also be a strong sense of guilt. So if we ourselves are not in a healing crisis moment, or at least one that maybe we're dealing with things in our life and we feel okay, but we see a loved one or somebody who's not, we may feel a deep sense of guilt around, how come I can feel this good, but like, why can't I give that to this other person? Why isn't it me? Why is it happening to them? And wanting to take on maybe some of that pain, some of that suffering, some of that crisis to help heal. And as we maybe go into further into this, I can talk a little bit about my, suggestions around that. But that would be sort of how one would indicate for themselves that they're in that state.
Thank you. So I'm imagining like a wheel, like there's like the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual symptoms. And there's also like the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual types of healing crisis. But I think with a lot of those, many of the feelings that you guys echo are similar, both for the person that's experiencing the healing crisis, and then also the person that is the caregiver, the loved one, the friend, the parent, the child, whoever it is, the sister, the brother, the neighbor, where there's feelings of fear and guilt, even guilt for being in the healing crisis and not wanting to be the burden all the time, right? Or overwhelm and not knowing when it's going to end, like this impending, like, is this for life? So I can imagine how challenging and difficult all of this must be for both the person experiencing it as well as the person that is the loved one. I found this thing online, and I'm just going to share it quickly here. See if I can figure out the tech around this. I think I can. It's like the stages of crisis. And it's like on a continuum. And we can be, in any stage. There's the thriving all the way to being in crisis. Because I wanted to touch on some of the things that happen to help us know what the precursors are to watch out for, like just some of the warning signs, so that maybe we can get at it before the crisis actually happens. So as neighbors and friends, as people taking care of ourselves and each other, to be able to identify some of the symptoms, the precursors to watch out for, knowing that if this continues, you can end up in crisis. Like we gotta support you right now. So it just brings me to the surviving and struggling piece. And I think when I go through this list, nervousness and sadness and easily overwhelmed and irritated, increased need for control and the difficulty adjusting to changes, trouble sleeping and eating, like up to the struggling category, exhaustion, poor performance, difficulty making decisions or concentrating, avoiding interaction with others, fatigue, aches and pains. These are things we can look out for. So when it comes to, I'm just going to stop the share here. When it comes to working on some of these symptoms, at different stages, what do you guys feel are the strategies for self-care and also like for supporting others? But if we could focus just on the self right now, and then move into how we can care for each other. If we notice that some of those categories, then I'll share the image with you guys in the chat box as well. What strategies do you guys suggest? Like, what are some of your top coping mechanisms for dealing with some of these symptoms?
Well, I would say one of the most common things that come up with clients from all ranges, and I've had to like go through an experience with myself. It's this. It seems basic, but it's like this level of like not enoughness and just feeling love for existing and not needing to do anything else to be in a place in need and feel like we can receive the love that we do need, which a lot of the time, to me, I'll bring people through some awareness of breath, so awareness of body, awareness of our senses. So bringing in enough awareness of body, enough awareness of sensations, enough awareness of emotions, and then this brings in even more awareness of the mind. And from here, I'll draw people into their heart center and become more aware of their spiritual nature. And from here, we really feel this eternal well, and this source of love, and feel the love inside of ourselves. And it's from here where we feel safety, and we feel trust. And fundamentally, it seems like so many of us get on this hamster wheel of thinking we need to do something else or become something else in order to receive this love. And that perpetuates a cycle of I need to do something in order to receive the love that I need. And that's a very harmful cycle. And it seems even people that are thriving more often the time will enter into more of that survival mode, because this is still here, and this is root chakra. And it's what I find is the most fundamental thing that continually we need to go back to. I've had issues with gambling, with poker in particular, and the last time that I like lapsed into that, and I noticed this like crisis mode come on. So much of me is trying to do something in order to remedy the situation, and a part of it there is a doing where I need to express where I'm at, but there's also a need to like be able to just be with where I'm at and accept that. And this is what I've learned about pain is so often we're looking to do something to remedy the pain. So often we're looking to do something so this can be over or done with, or for things to go back to normal. And these are all forms of resistance. So first and foremost, we need to acknowledge and meet ourselves where we're at. And in this acknowledgement and in this awareness, self-acceptance begins to happen automatically, is what I've come to understand and realize. So I'd say foundationally, those are the things that are first and foremost most necessary. And there's some other ways to get to it, but I just wanted to explain that because that seems to be coming up consistently in what I'm doing and when I'm having more of a hard time.
So to add to that, I think, similar to or building on what I had kind of said in the first first sort of section, was sometimes we don't actually know, right? I might have trouble falling asleep over a few nights, and I might just think, well, yeah, I've got this big project at work, so maybe that makes sense. And so then if that becomes a bit of a norm and I stop thinking about it, it may be 2 to 3 weeks later and I'm still not sleeping properly. And unless I'm able to recognize that this has now become a much longer term um, thing for myself, and maybe there's a few other things on those, surviving and struggle lists, and hopefully not yet crisis, but um, if I'm not able to pinpoint it, it probably will get worse if I'm not able to recognize that for myself or be aware of that. And so one way I think that we can maybe be more assured that it will be noticed and brought to our awareness is if we're connected to other people. And this isn't always possible for everybody. And connection is going to look different for everyone. And it may also just be a connection to self through journaling, right? So journaling about what, like a daily sort of journal around what life is like for myself, if there isn't another physical person to be connected with, to sort of have that sense of what's going on with me, because they might be able to see it more clearly. And if I read back on my journal, I may be able to see it more clearly if there's a pattern of something that's gotten potentially worse, or maybe stayed the same but is in, again, that surviving or struggling category. Another thing, and I think this is related to any kind of healing crisis, but maybe just if I focus maybe very specifically on our experience with being in at least the Toronto, Ontario context of COVID-19 and the lockdown or shutdowns or whatever we're in, we are in a bit of a trance, right? We've been at home basically for just over a year for the most part. This is our new normal. And I don't know if we're allowing ourselves necessarily to feel the full range of what the emotion of this has meant for us. And so part of, being able to recognize being in that again, those two categories of struggle or survival or crisis is, what is the emotional expression that I'm allowing myself? If I'm angry, am I allowing that anger to be expressed? If I'm frustrated, am I allowing that frustration to be expressed? Because if we aren't, what can happen from that more emotional, spiritual perspective is that anger, that frustration, that anxiety can manifest in a health crisis. And so if we're not catching it early on, again, by being able to express ourselves, then it may turn into that sort of last category of crisis. And how do we bring it, more to that thriving category? Knocking ourselves out of hypnosis, right? Really getting out of that trance. And how do we do that? It can be as simple as just changing up your routine in a very small way. And another way is to really check in on the story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves. So when, again, I'll go back to, the story I told, or the event of me having that slip disc. Like the excruciating pain lasted for almost the entire year. And the story that I told myself was that I was going to be in this pain. Like if it hadn't gone away in a month, there's no way it's ever going to go away. Like I just couldn't, it couldn't fathom it. And so then, it became much more of a struggle as time went on. For whatever reason, and this has happened to me several times, when I had an appointment with a surgeon, and the option was to basically fuse the disc so that there was no disc, or fuse the vertebrae so that there was no disc to slip. Less than 1 week went by and I was no longer in pain. It's like, it blows my mind that was what it took for me. And so for me, yes, there was a physical manifestation of pain for sure. And like the jolt of being told that your spine will be fused together at this certain area was enough to sort of knock that pain out of my body. And so there was nothing physical that happened. He didn't even touch my body, right? It was that sort of emotional. So again, it's what story are we telling ourselves? And so it's not necessarily as easy as just saying, well, I don't need to believe that this is what's going on with me. There's a lot more work to it than that, but it's maybe recognizing that I am telling myself a story about me, and do I need to explore that? And how can I explore that?
We have a question from one of our guests that chooses to stay anonymous. When the healing crisis is overtaking you, and you need to balance between being in the healing crisis and trying to get out of the hypnosis of it, they're wondering about how deep do they dive into, because when you're dredging up like old patterns, old beliefs, in order to heal them, and you're looking at them, then they can so easily overcome you and overtake you. And like, how do you balance how much you have to look at it versus shifting the story into something more positive? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is there a point where it's dangerous to stay in the old wounds?
Well, I mean, one question like I would have back is, who are you working with, right? Are you working with, is it just yourself that, you're going through this process with? And that's not bad. But if there is something that may be overwhelming or overtaking you, it may be worth working with someone else, whether it's a professional or it's, a friend who can just be grounded with you and monitor and sort of, know that they can recommend that, like, maybe today we've done enough, or maybe you've explored enough on this, like give yourself some time to integrate. I think is a big piece, because sometimes and again, this is like what I said about, I was told that I would have to have surgery and then the pain went away. Sometimes just saying your story out loud to someone else can help shift the perspective on it. So doesn't necessarily need to take a lot of deep work, although sometimes it does. Sometimes one of the best ways to get started or to even heal part of it is to just tell the story, right? Really just tell the whole story to somebody you trust. And that's where maybe a therapist can be an easy outlet, because they're not involved in your life. They're not attached. They're not invested in any way, shape, or form. They're never going to judge you. They're never going to interject in your life outside of the session, right? So it's very much a container for your story. And I have had clients who we've done 1 or 2 sessions together, and it's really just been, I got what I needed from coming here because I was able to tell you my life story, just with the intent, right? The types of questions that I ask. So of course that's maybe a more simplistic, depending on what someone's actually going through. But I would say that, can it become dangerous to stay in the story? Is that was sort of the last part of that question that you asked? I don't know if it can. I don't know that it would be more dangerous than it already like is, in terms of how deep is the pain, is the suffering, is the crisis right now, right? Because that is the story. Is the story going to change? And here's the tricky thing too, is our brain doesn't always remember things the way they are. We remember things, we see things, we hear things the way we are. And so if we're changing, maybe let's say deeper into crisis, we may remember things in a distorted way that reinforces the crisis that we're in. And that could be more dangerous, right? If we're not checking the story, if we're not checking back on the reality that we did live. And how do we do that? I mean, that can be just really questioning ourselves. Like, is this true? Is this really true? How do I know that it's true? And or speaking to someone else who might have been there at the same time.
Chris, do you have anything at all to add? I'm just clarifying a couple more questions from our guests.
Yeah, and it brings up areas where I would be like, where I would ask some more questions, but let me just feel into the thread here, because this is very poignant. Anyone who's becoming a lot more aware of their pain and traumas, I see this with so many people, as well as like the spiritual community in Toronto, is this like constant shadow work, and like not getting up for like a nice fresh of breath air, so to speak. And I think this is an incredibly important part about balance. And also, when we kind of get trapped and more identified with the pain of our trauma, we don't always let ourselves experience the the pleasure of life. And even like the simple thing of finding some nice music to put on that you know you like, that you know will make you feel good if you just did something like that. And I'm not saying that's going to like heal the whole issue, but the thing is, if we're in repetitive thought patterns that are making us feel shitty about ourselves, it's like either go talk to somebody about it who can give you more perspective, or do something that's going to make you feel good in the moment. And all the work that I'm about and what I do, it's like be in a place of more strength and vitality and loving yourself, and your healing process will come up anyway. You don't need to purposely go into some dark corner and feel crappy about yourself to do the healing work. That's actually not the healing work. That's going right back into the same cycles that we're looking to create anew. And yes, that cycle will continue to come back around. So we're still going to have to bring awareness to these areas. However, it's like, there's a process in life to everything, and any trauma that we've experienced, we will need to on some level or another um, experience that to heal that. And it's not to say we're experiencing it in the same way we have in the past, because we will continue to experience it in new ways as we have more perspective and come into it with more love, because we're coming into it with new awareness, we're coming into it with new consciousness, we're having deeper understanding. So often we're playing out cycles because we're not forgiving others or forgiving ourselves. And that higher understanding comes from realizing that so much of the things that have happened to us that have caused trauma or that we've done to ourselves, we take it so personally. We either say, oh, someone's kind of did this thing, so I'm living in this process, or I did this thing to myself, so that means I'm not a good person. And this shame causes spirals, and it causes any thoughts that we attach to those experiences can then start to cause cycles of this. And so many of us live in these cycles, and we're afraid to let other people know about it and express about it, because there's a part of us that believes that reality. However, when we start to express it more and start to open up about it, and even like Andrea is saying, in journaling or whatever it is that will help you to become aware of some of the thoughts that you have been believing about yourself that are creating this negative experience, you become less attached and less identified to it. So it's the awareness that sees, oh, I've been believing this about myself, and it's like, oh, okay, so now I have an opportunity to change that and also get to more of the core of the issue, and to understand more of the why. But so often we just stay in this cycle of believing the thought, and that is damaging. So at times I believe if you are experiencing that happening, it's like, go do anything else that's different. Like, switch your scene, switch your environment, and if you've been in it for a while, think about and consider, who do you trust in your life where you just notice you feel more comfortable to be yourself, where you just notice that you can express yourself, or if there's a therapist or someone you work with that you really do feel a resonance and trust with, then go to that person. Because like Andrea is saying, it's amazing how this just came up actually in my last client session, which I love, and I'm going to use this quote more often. But just as easily as we forget ourselves and forget our spiritual nature and forget the love that we are and all our positive qualities, we can just as easily remember. And it's so important to remember that. Just as quickly as we can forget and get into this negative place, we can just as easily remember and get into a place where we're feeling the love and feeling good about ourselves.
It's interesting, as you I forgot what you said, you wanted to feel into the thread. As you were doing that, I was responding to some questions from a couple of folks at the same time. And it's almost like as you were speaking, you were almost answering one of their questions. So it's really interesting. Good on you for your intuition there. The question, though, just in case you'd like to add anything to it, it was about grieving. Like grieving after the crisis has happened, grieving what happened. The whole process can be so intense, and the grief that you're left with afterwards. And I know you touched on shame. but is there anything that you guys can add for our guest today about how to cope with the grief that comes after the crisis?
I'll mention a couple things about grief, because grief is more often at the end of a cycle, and grief is like, it's a good sign. Grief is going to lead to relief, and in this, you're going to want to create more space for yourself to go into this grief, because any resistance you're having about it is more about the fear of feeling the love and the deeper understanding and the beauty of going through the process that you've gone through. Grief is transformational energy, and it's deep love, because it is truly the letting go of the suffering. It's the letting go of the energy that you've been holding so strong and tight, because we've feared in ways, allowing ourselves to come to know these deeper truths. So grief is a beautiful emotion, and it allows you to have the mourning of your past self that didn't know how to hold yourself in the ways that you're holding yourself. In that grieving, you feel the warmth, you feel yourself holding yourself in awareness, and literally it's like rebirth energy. You become born anew, and you don't even have to do anything. All you have to do is allow yourself to feel the feelings that you're experiencing, and breathe into it more, like to the greatest depths, because the more you go into that depth, the more you'll experience the paradox really quickly. It's a beautiful process, and I've grown to love, because I know when I'm right at that point of feeling that grieving, it's like, yeah, this is this is finally going to be the end of this cycle. And it's a great time. I'm a water sign, so it helps me most to like get into water, even just get in a shower and feel that water coming down, and that helps the flow of the emotion for the grieving process for me.
Thank you.
I would add, I think, I agree that, the grief can lead to relief. And I would say, I would add that, like, I think the grieving can start a little earlier than right at the end of the process. And here's my reason why. Um, every change, whether it's a good change or a change we're not looking forward to, comes with loss. And so when, for example, at the very beginning of my own disc slip, right away I was experiencing loss. I was experiencing loss of mobility. I was experiencing loss of my social life. I was experiencing loss of work for a little while. I was experiencing a whole bunch of loss, and I had to deal with it, or not, right? Like I could have just not dealt with it. But part of the dealing with those changes and those losses, whether they're temporary, which they were for in my case, or they're permanent, which they often can be for people, help or starting to deal with that loss and grieve those losses, those changes, because it's change. It doesn't necessarily mean loss is bad. It just means that what we knew, what our story was, what our let's say what our trance was, is no longer there. And so we've been kicked out of our comfort zone, even if our comfort zone had been not ideal before that anyway. We're now adjusting, and part of that adjustment is partly grieving what no longer is. And so thinking about one client situation in particular, with a parent who was suffering from dementia, and an increasingly progressive dementia, where the beginning of when I started seeing this client, their parent was still pretty cognizant and pretty aware of who everyone was, and then progressively was getting worse. And so there was a lot of loss happening at a rapid pace, because the parent that they knew and wanted to be there physically was still there, mentally, emotionally was not there. And so rapid pace dealing with all of those losses. And then of course, if and well, not if, because all of us are mortal, right? So we will die at some point. But when that loss is final, when the parent is no longer with them, there will be a final grieving, but there will be a series of grieving throughout. And so I just wanted to make that point, that I think that grief can come at the various stages of whatever the crisis is, whatever the experience is, because we have to recognize that there are losses. And again, they may not be permanent, but even if they're temporary, it's important to recognize. And I'll say this too, I often actually bring this up with clients who are going through the loss of a relationship. And I'll talk about, so like a romantic relationship, a breakup, a divorce, something like that. But what I'll often say is, we can think of the macro loss, which is the loss of the relationship, but do we think about the micro losses, right? Do we think about the fact that we used to, watch a certain TV show together, or we used to walk a certain route together every Saturday, or we used to, order food from the same place every Thursday. And those micro losses all add up to that macro loss. And if we don't grieve each of those things, and it might just take a second of acknowledgement, right? It might not be a long process. It might just be like, that's no longer what I do. Okay. And you release it, as Chris was saying, it releases. That attachment is no longer there, but there's certainly a process to grieving.
Thank you. It's interesting, the tie between dealing with a healing crisis and grief and shame. It makes me wonder about just another panel discussion focused specifically on grief and loss, because it can be it's so a part of so many different healing experiences, grief and loss, and especially right now with the response to COVID, just dealing with so much change and so much loss on a community level. I think that's definitely a topic we should explore. Thank you so much, you guys, for taking the time to respond to our guests' questions today. I do have one more question for you before we close for today, and this is specifically around our response as community members, as citizens of a society that's struggling. Our health system is pretty taxed right now, and it has become more and more evident to me as these months have gone on, that it is the responsibility of us as citizens and as people, as friends and as family members, as neighbors, to support each other and not just count on systems to be in place formally that can meet our needs. And when it comes to dealing with a healing crisis, I'd really love to hear your suggestions and your feedback around how community can support each other during this time, how we can be there for our friends, our family members, and for buddy on the street that we see every day, amidst so much struggle and pressure. I think there's an opportunity really right now to shift our over-reliance on organized systems and to take some onus on ourselves for being there for each other. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your suggestions, what you think the priorities are.
I can start this time. Well, I think one, like it kind of is that theme of the trance, right? So one of the things is coming out of our trance a little bit and being more aware, really just sort of having our eyes open to what's going on around us. And that doesn't necessarily mean, much more intense action than that, but just if we have an awareness, we may actually shift our behaviors a little bit. And so part of that might be through mindfulness. Like I think one of the suggestions that kept coming up for me as you were asking that question was specifically, mindful practices or mindful meditations around, like a Tonglen meditation or a loving kindness meditation, which can just really build resilience and tolerance in oneself to then have more compassion and an awareness of others as we go about our daily lives. For those who aren't who don't meditate or don't feel that that's what they want to do. There are a variety of ways that we can be of service to our community. You know, one way is to just check in, or to, you know, really sort of make oneself available to others. Maybe, you know, I think this has been said many times, but I think most of us have some sort of Zoom fatigue. And actually, this has come up a few times recently for me, both in session and with supervision, around the connection that we create in a phone call is actually somewhat more intimate than in a video call. And so while the inclination might be to, like, you know, see the person on video because we can't see them in person, and physically in person, um, it's actually a little bit more intimate to have that phone call. So maybe just, you know, calling a friend, or um, even text messaging, really just sort of having that connection. And in terms of the broader community, like the global community, I am a huge believer in, when I heal myself, I heal part of you. And as you heal yourself, you heal part of me. And so if we can commit to just doing whatever work, whatever it's, if it's deep work or just self-compassion work, if it's, you know, affirmation work, or just something to help lift our own vibration, help, you know, bring us a little bit more happiness, then that, my belief is, it spills over to others, and so can, you know, help the global community or the greater community as a result.
So good. So good. um, I can speak about a lot of the things that I do, as far as creating community, but I also think things are different now, obviously, in the situation that we're in. So I'll kind of go into more like on a personal level. I've really been just creating those deeper bonds with my mom and dad, and I feel like community connections stem and branch out from our closest and most intimate, deepest relationships. So I've like really prioritized connection with my partner and my mom and dad, and deepening those connections, first and foremost. My mom actually came for a month in Costa Rica to the residency that we were running, which we did a lot of amazing healing work. And I find when these bonds, even just like one area that clicks, changes all of my relationships, and sets a standard, for the foundation for all my other relationships. So I just want to say that first and foremost, because, you know, let's say we create all these community connections, but still some of our closest relationships are still having like some issues. I know for myself, I'm such a networker, and I connect with so many different people, and when I'm not prioritizing like my main closest circle, it's like almost everything gets watered down, and then it doesn't even really matter that much that I'm connecting with these people in these ways, because, you know, I still see that even as I network out, or speak to people that I'm not as close to, I can have like a really great impact. But it's also like I see I need to be feeling it. Like I need to be feeling the love, and I need to feel like I'm not just giving, like I'm in a place where I'm really just being authentic with my experience, and just being honest with who I am. And it's becoming a lot easier to do the work that I'm doing, because I'm just being myself. You know, at the end of the day, I don't feel like I need to do anything more than that. And yeah, as far as again, like creating community, it's like I'm loving offering free things online. I'm just gonna type my email in here, because I do offer a free 45-minute session with me, for an intuitive healing and empowerment session. And if you check me out, Chris Dubb Kundalini, on Facebook events, I'll be offering more community offerings, spiritual support circles, to have these discussions, to go into more of our deeper challenges and our pain. And I, for people that I know have a hard time, like I think of my brother Scott, who have a hard time just speaking about their emotions honestly. I bring up first and foremost the areas of challenge in my life, and not in a way where I'm asking them for support, but they ask me how I'm doing. Well, then I'll just kind of like speak about some of the harder things, and I feel that opens up and makes it easier for them to talk about those things. And yeah, because not everyone wants to hear how well I'm doing in certain areas, and not everyone wants to hear or is open to support me in the areas that I'm having more challenge in. So I'm very aware of the people that I can trust in those ways, and also just aware of who I'm speaking to. So I know how I can best open up that connection.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think like, the healthy boundaries is really important as a support person. Really figuring out what your priorities are, if they're your family or your chosen family, what those are, and how you can support the people in your life in different ways. Like, for instance, you're offering the groups and the one-on-one sessions, and then the bulk of your energy is devoted to family and supporting them. Yeah, and I hear you too. Like, I know a lot of people. I'm often reaching out to a lot of people, and it's really easy to water down that support. For me, I find too, having a healthy spiritual practice for myself, where I surrender to source and situations and circumstances that are for my highest good. I'm only ever given what I can handle. I'm not necessarily overwhelmed anymore by being bombarded by a whole bunch of people in crisis. There's usually only a couple people at a time. And I've noticed that as I live more in alignment with my integrity and my highest self, I attract exactly who needs me in that moment. And it's not everybody, I also, one of the things that I do is I carry mental health support resources with me, like referral cards for telephone support lines and that kind of thing. So I can easily give a card and say, I might not be able to help you right now because I'm really busy, but here's the number for somebody who can. And you can call them at any time of the night or day. But I find that is those are some things that have really helped me. Yeah. I would like to invite the folks who are present here today. Is there anything that you feel is helpful as citizens and as community members, as individuals, to support the community around you or the people around you as they deal with a healing crisis? Is there anything that you would like to pass on or share with each other in terms of a resource? No pressure. Yeah, that's okay. So we have reached our time. It's 12:05. We started 5 minutes later, so we're right on the hour, which is great. I know that this is a really big topic, everybody, and we've just kind of scratched the surface, but I really do hope that some of the tools and resources that Andrea and Chris have suggested, and the mindset and the aspects of healing crisis, I hope they've given you some food for thought, and some resources to move forward so that you can both catch healing crisis before it becomes a really big issue. Chris, you had a quote when we were preparing for this. How do we love ourselves before we're forced to love ourselves, or something? Or how do we show up for ourselves? Do you remember you said something like that?
It's interesting. I don't know if it'll come right out, but like I can just speak to the energy of it. But it's like,
Yeah.
like you will always end up facing yourself in life. You will always end up facing what is there. Whether it's your greatest glory or your deepest shame or whatever it is. So when we choose to meet ourselves where we're at now and be honest, especially we're talking about healing crisis, we're talking about pain. When we choose to meet ourselves now, well, then life doesn't have to, kind of take you out from the knees and be like, you gotta be aware of yourself, because we're all so freaking powerful and we don't realize our level of influence on each other and our impact on each other, and we don't want to reach these amazing levels of power and vitality and even further influence over each other by knowing your power if we're not in a place where we are aware of the pain we're still holding on to. Because with
Mm.
less and less awareness of it, we will project it onto other people. We will create negative circumstances, and it'll be harder to figure out. It's like my yoga classes and everything, I'm always talking about let's rise in the most easeful and graceful way, because you're going to reach levels of more vital energy no matter what, if you are committing to self-awareness. And
Hmm.
it's not a process we need to rush through. I think that's our biggest problem as a humanity, is we're just trying to get nowhere quickly, and it's like, why?
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And thank you for providing your contact information in the chat box. Andrea, would you mind providing your contact information as well, in case people need some extra support? Yeah, so closing words. Thank you from everybody. Andrea, Chris, do you guys have some final words to share?
Andrea?
Yeah, I just thank you for coming to the panel and for listening. And as I said at the beginning, this is a topic that has come up for me a lot more intensely. One thing I didn't talk about, but has also come up, is burnout. And a lot of clients recently who've been dealing with burnout at work and changing careers and really questioning, what they want to do for their, work or vocation or career. And this is something that is unique for me in terms of a practitioner. I haven't seen this so much before. So that's another part of a healing crisis, I think, within oneself, that deserves space and didn't have time. So these are all things that I think, if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out. And hopefully if I can provide more resources or support, then hopefully I'll be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're not alone, everybody. So I hope that you continue to be the best that you can be, and just keep moving towards that space of thriving. And if you have any other questions, comments, please reach out. I'm at innerartscollective.com and innerartscollective@gmail.com. So we're here for you. If there's more topics that you'd like to cover or review, if you'd like us to highlight something that's of interest to you, please just let us know. Reach out. We have over 40 members at the Inner Arts Collective that range from, chiropractors to therapists to astrologers. So it's a full range, and we're here to support. So wishing you all the best as you move forward in life. Blessed be everybody.
Much love. Pura vida.